What's up, y'all? Will Linger here with VTech Consulting. Hey, today we're going to start getting into some pretty exciting stuff. Now that we've built out our chart of accounts, we have our bookkeepers online and our accountants online with what we're doing. We're going to start diving into financial planning and analysis, or also known as FP&A. This is super exciting. This is week number 2 of our 9 weeks to better business finances. FP&A is really an expansive topic based on what kind of business you're in and what your goals are. There's lots of things to plan for and to measure. There's lots of different ways to do it. A lot of really good tools out there can help you along the way. What we're really going to be talking about today is a lot of the basics, right? We're barely even going to be scratching the surface on what kind of power, what kind of information does good FP&A give us. And so this is really the basics. I have intentions on adding lots more videos as time goes on to be able to help y'all out with where you're at with your business. So let's jump in. As we mentioned in the previous episode, financial planning and analysis really asks two questions. What are you planning for, and how are you going to measure it? If you can answer those two questions, then a lot of what you want to keep track of becomes clear, and a lot of the motivation as to why becomes clear for you as well. And what I like to do, especially for the businesses that have been in operation for at least the last 3 to 5 years, is go back and look at what have we spent in the past, whether that's quarterly or annually, and then be able to get a sense of, okay, well, this is what maybe this next coming up year might look like. So this video is being recorded in 2022. I might go back to 2018 and start from there and get a sense of how is this business growing over time, what do they spend money on, and then to begin to build out a budget going forward. And really that's the second big point. Getting your budget together is really looking at previous year's profit and loss statements and understanding, okay, this is where we spent money and where. One of the ways that you can circumvent not having a good P&L or not having good data is to look at previous year's tax returns for your business. And in there, you'll get a sense, at least those larger categories, of where you've spent money, and then look at that as what we can infer going forward. And as far as metrics go, again, as I mentioned, this is just going to be a real simple kind of basic level understanding of how do we use what we've built in our QuickBooks or FreshBooks, our accounting system, and how do we transpose that information over into whatever tool we're using to keep track of the budget. So that could be Google Sheets or Excel or other softwares. So let's jump in. Okay, so what you have on your screen here, and if you are listening to this on the podcast, you might want to switch over to YouTube just so you can get the visuals. But here in Google Sheets, I have what is essentially going to be the structure of my budget going forward. So this is for fiscal year 2022, and you'll see that I have 4 quarters, so an entire year broken down into quarters, and these are my actuals. My planned amount comes over here in column I. There's not a lot of data in this column because this is a blank, essentially a blank template. But what I've done is I've exploded the category of advertising, and now we're looking at the 4 main areas that we spend money on when it comes to our business's advertising. So for fiscal year 2022, I can see that for client gifts, I'm budgeting $1,000 for myself. For print, $5,000, promotional advertising, $200, and website is at $500. When I close out each quarter, and what I mean when I say close out is you have allocated all of your expenses to their proper buckets, right, based on that nice chart of accounts that you and your bookkeeper set up, and this budget here that maps perfectly to that. You've already done a really good job there. You close out those books. They've hard closed them, meaning that they've gone through and done all the reconciliation process, and now you know the final amounts for each one of these line items. And so I can come over and either hand key them in or copy and paste them if my format of my profit and loss statement actually is mirror image to this budget here. And it can be. It just takes a little bit of maintenance to do that. So either way, it's fine. I have a learning difference, and so if I'm hand keying in data, I need to make sure I'm doing that when I'm real fresh. So early in the morning is much better for me than late at night. But regardless, I'm still double checking 1,000 times before I'm issuing reports. So just make sure that all of my numbers add up correctly, which is always good. So and in column C, what we're going to be looking at is some of those actuals, and what that does down below is it gives us what our total expenses have been so far for this quarter, what's our profit margin, our net profit margin, our burn rate, and then what would be our emergency savings goals. So that's from the expenses perspective. How about for the top line revenue? What you'll see here in line 4 is our sales number. Now, our overall goal for the year is $700,000. So far, our business has done $141,000 and change. What you'll see underneath it is lines 5 and 6, which gives me two different numbers to compare what we think about this number to. So $141,000 is a lot of money. That's great. But how are we doing against our goals for that quarter? We know where we're at for the year, but how are we against the calendar? That's one way to measure performance of our sales. And then 2 is we've been in business for a handful of years, and you can go back and look at how much revenue do we normally expect to see percentage-wise in each quarter. That's a really helpful thing. There's a lot of businesses that are probably listening to this right now that are on heavy seasonal adjustment. Your revenue is highly attributable to what part of the year we're in, whether that's first quarter, second quarter, third, or fourth. If I sold all snow globes, right, with Santa Claus figurines in it, I'm going to be expecting that the majority or the highest percentage of my revenue is going to be recognized in Q4 or Q1, right? If I think about sales that may trickle over into the end of the year. But Q4 is going to be a season where I might see 70 or 80% or more of my annualized revenue happening in that quarter. So again, knowing where you're at from both a top line sales perspective as well as your expenses is really good. One other thing that I want to mention about sales in particular is what is sales compared to what you've invoiced, right? So for a lot of you that have spent a lot of time in your books, you'll know that your salesperson or your sales team will sell sometimes far in ahead of the calendar year versus where you have invoiced. Meaning, if I had a salesperson that sold something to a customer that cost $25,000 and they agreed on terms that was, a monthly retainer type invoice, then I may not see that revenue until, 3 or 4 months, right? At least a portion of it. So is that going to be reflected here? Are we going to be able to see that here? Well, not necessarily, because what QuickBooks or FreshBooks or any of these accounting systems give you a lot of times is what have I invoiced, which is not necessarily the same thing as what I have sold, right? If you think about the example that I just gave you. So this is giving you a real actual view of, here's how many dollars we've put out in revenue, in invoices, and what we could expect to come in. I've got other ways to manage cash flow and contracts going forward and how we can anticipate where our business is growing and at what part of the year so that we know how to staff up or down depending on those needs. But this will give you a real good idea of how profitable are we and are we on track or off track, both from our invoicing and as well as our expenses. So, and the big percent that is important down here at the bottom is our net profit margin. So regardless of what's happening on your sales or your expenses, the folks that are managing the P&L, the folks that are doing these types of exercises, you do have a lot of influence on the business as to how healthy are you. And this would also gateway into knowing how much cash you should keep on hand, right? And lots of other metrics. But for today, this is where we're going to leave it. This is your cursory overview of financial planning analysis, really answering two big questions. What am I tracking, and how will I know that I'm making progress on it? That's what these are going to give you. So if you have any questions, or you need me to address anything in greater detail, please drop a comment down below. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you all next time.